let's, for our example case, look at this drawing. So if you see here, there's a conveyor here and a curve and more conveyor here and then a curve up. So let's say we're drawing that. So we have two conveyors here. Oh, no, there should be only one conveyor here. Let's redraw that so that it's to the left. Realign it. Now this conveyor, I want to change it from down to, I want it to be left. And that's actually incorrect, potentially. So left and right and up and down do matter because conveyor direction. Now, you can't see it right now because there's nothing happening. But when the conveyor is running, I don't know, it might be hard to see it, but if you're looking at here, there's actually arrows in there. We added symbols on top of all the colors for colorblind people. So it doesn't matter if you're colorblind or not, there's different symbols for everything. So you should easily be able to tell the status of anything. But the direction arrows also shows you the flow of the conveyor. So once you've laid out all of the conveyor graphics, it's probably a good idea to come in and make sure the direction is correct. So especially when you're doing the testing in the office, of making sure all the tags are linked up correctly. Make sure that that direction is. So right now I'm not going to care about the directionality. So I'm going to say align to right. And then we go back to our drawing. And this one is a little longer. There's a short one here too. So maybe we want to make that one shorter and then add a long one, and then another short one, and then a curve.
The measurements are in inches for the conveyor.
Yeah. Okay. So if you look here, the conveyor size, you can make that literal inches. So 28 is about where the most of our standard conveyor is. So that's why I have 28 as the default. So maybe let's make this a little shorter. Let's say this one's 50. Let's duplicate this and let's make this one longer. Let's say it's 200. So we measured it and it's 200. Another thing to note while doing this is you do have some artistic license. You want to be as exact as you can, but there are times where you're going to have to fudge things a little bit, or you're going to have to explode things, like you explode an AutoCAD drawing, you might want to explode things. So that way the labels and everything looks nice. So while you want to be as accurate as possible, this is also an HMI. They're not going to have access to measuring things. So, you know, you do have some artistic license there. So I'm just going to delete that out of the way. Let's say this one is the same, so we can duplicate that. Align to right. That one out of the way. Duplicate that. Change the directionality so that it's pointing up. And then finally align to right. So now we have our kind of our flow down. So let's say that these two conveyors actually make up, they're actually one conveyor name. So the conveyor names are defined by conveyor sections that are usually one motor or a motor group that's running. So one run signal runs multiple motors. So we want to visually make sure that the operators know clearly what is one conveyor. There's a property in here, blend 1 and blend 2, which allows us to kind of blend the line, if you will, in between.
So in other words, that little itty bitty one.
Exactly. So sometimes you have to kind of play with it to figure out which one is the right one to blend. But when we blend the line on both sides, now it looks like this is one continuous conveyor, just like it is, just like it should be. So now it's clear to tell from the operator standpoint where exactly what one section of conveyor is. Then we can start, say this is the complete conveyor layout. You can continue on, but we're going to say for our instance, this is it. So then we can start adding some devices in there. The first thing, the most common thing, is a photo eye, right? So again, not all the devices have to be at the same zoom level as far as device to device. So e-stop doesn't necessarily have to be at the same zoom level as a photo eye, but all of the photo eyes should be at the same zoom level. All of the e-stops, all of the solenoids should be at the same zoom level.
Have a group match.
Exactly. So that all the text looks consistent, all the photo eyes look consistent, everything looks consistent. Consistency is key. Let's say there's a full photo eye. Now that Jack, you might not be as aware, but for the photo eyes, one thing that is consistent is pretty much every single conveyor has an exit photo eye. Because we track the packages through the system, and we can track whether a box is on this conveyor or that conveyor by knowing when it's crossed that exit photo eye. So one rule of thumb is to probably put an exit photo eye at every single conveyor, because that's where there's going to be an exit photo eye, and that exit photo eye is going to be at pretty much the end of the conveyor. Now, because of that, there are embedded photo eyes. So I can click here and click an exit photo eye, and of course it doesn't show it. Then I might have to look into, it could be because the onion layering is not set up, or it could be a bug. I don't know. We'll focus on that later. But there should be an option to just click exit photo eye and it put in an exit photo eye, or you can do it.
Is that by right clicking on the conveyor then?
Right clicking on the conveyor,
okay,
and clicking it in there.
And it should work.
It should work. So just like the direction of the conveyor, you can change the direction of the photo eye. Yeah, there's left, right, up, down. I have vertical or horizontal in front. The up, down refers to, the triangle is the actual head of the eye of the photo eye, and then that's the reflector, yeah. So when it's blocked, it's going to, this is going to turn green, and this is going to turn green, and that red line is going to disappear. When it's unblocked, it looks like this. So there's a very contrasting visual indication whether that photo eye is blocked or not. So yeah, let's just duplicate some of these. Put some photo eyes in here. So let's also put in, let's say there's an e-stop here. So let's put in an e-stop. Let's say there's a solenoid here. Or let's say, yeah, let's say there's a solenoid here. Other options, there's a prox. There's a prox switch that you can put in. There's a scanner. It's another widget. What other devices are there? Prox. I mean, really,
Encoder?
huh?
Encoder?
Encoder? No, we don't typically show the encoders. Oh yeah, limit switch.
Sorry.
It's limit,
Hyphen switch.
yeah, dash
Okay.
switch.
Just making sure. I thought so.
Yep. Now, one thing to note with the scanner involves a little more. Oh, there's also ADA panels. We show ADA panels. ADA dash panel. So with the ADA panel and the scanners, there's a little bit extra setup because if you actually zoom in to the scanner, there's more information here. There's the last barcode and the read rate. There's a link to the manual. There's statistics, information, and images. So for images, we do show, for the scanners, we show live images. And that is usually set up in its own screen because there's a lot of bandwidth for sending back that image. So you don't want to really send that when they're not actually looking at it. So that's why we kind of separate it to its own screen. And so that way they can see the live image for multiple scanners at the same time. But typically we don't like to show more than, 5 or 6 images at a given time, because again, there's a lot of bandwidth for sending image files over the network. So there's that. If you zoom in even further to the scanner widget, there's a scanner, filtered scanners stat screen for just that specific scanner. And then there is some scanner information, like the brand of the scanner, the IP address, and the ability to ping it directly here.
And whether it's master or server.
Yeah.
So like, can I change if it's a master? Like if the Canva is master, can I change it to state directly to the HTML?
No, you can just ping.
Ping that.
Yeah, just ping it. Yep. So yeah, when you get to the point of actually needing to set up a scanner on the HMI, come get me and we'll walk through it. Because again, I don't expect you to remember half this stuff. There's a lot here to remember. So with the ADA panels, there's also information underneath there. There's, for the A panels, there's a status of the network. And then there's drawings. All of the ADA panels have the drawings linked to it.
The specific panel, or is that just
Yes, that's for the specific panel. So as much as possible, we try to include manuals and panel drawings in directly into the HMI, because that's a big selling point. A lot of the times,
It's right there at their fingertips.
exactly. Yeah. Most sites that are maintenance guys, they lose those panel drawings. A lot of times they don't have that drawing and they're like, I don't know what any of this means. So
This looks good.
exactly. So one thing to note with the photo eyes have a label embedded in them. You have to specify the photo eye type. So if I right click here, I can say exit photo eye. And now you see, yeah, you just have to replace it. So exit photo eye, here's you can start seeing where you have to have some potential artistic license. So this one, the text on top of each other, that looks kind of crappy. So what I can do is I can move this from vertical up to vertical down and then reposition it.
And even if that's not correct by the real drawing, it's okay.
Exactly.
If the situation called for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So change that to an exit photo eye. Change that to an exit photo eye. And again, probably want to move that one to a vertical down.
Can we set up a snaps in this when designing so that like can we manually set any snap value?
Technically, yes. There is a snap. There is a kind of snap to grid option with ZOE, but it doesn't. It's usually easier just to manually move it. Yeah. So let's make this one a exit photo eye. Well, let's change that and make that a full photo eye. Okay. So the e-stop doesn't have an embedded label. So that one we have to insert another widget called the label widget. So that label widget actually can be used for photo eyes too if you want. There are some cases where you might want that photo eye text moved around and it's easier just to insert another label. Yeah, really ultimately there's multiple ways to do this. So I'm going to copy this placement zoom out of here and paste it into here to make it more consistent. So let's give that label, and then you want to select the label, the type. So we're going to call this a e-stop push button, and we'll duplicate that label here, and we're going to right click and call that a solenoid label. And then let's actually start mapping this together now. Now that we have kind of the devices laid out, now we can start mapping things together. So I'm going to give that conveyor name its conveyor name. So let's call it just P101. And let's actually give it some text. Okay. So now, now we have that conveyor named P101. This is where I said grouping will come in handy. Oh, one last thing to include in here is a manual control. Every motorized conveyor, unless it's a gravity conveyor, it will have a manual control. So we want to come in here and click manual control. One thing to note with manual controls are only going to be available when they click on the conveyor, when they explicitly want to see that manual control. So therefore, manual controls are kind of the only thing that's an exception, that it does not have to be at the same zoom level as all the manual controls. The big thing with the manual controls is we want to be able to view that manual control and see that conveyor in the same light, or in the same screen. So for instance, we wouldn't want this manual control to be like way in here, because when we were looking at that conveyor, that manual control is too small to use. And likewise, we wouldn't want it way out here. We want it huge because, again, it's not going to look good. So again, it's all about aesthetics.
So that's going to be one of our creative licenses.
Exactly. Yeah. So here's where grouping comes in handy. So if you select this manual control, this photo eye, this conveyor, this e-stop, say relates to that conveyor, and this photo eye, these are all part of the same conveyor. They all belong to that conveyor. Now you can right click and say group, and you see magically
It's all P101.
it's all P101. It's all relabeled. Then after that's done, you can ungroup it. You can keep it grouped or you can ungroup it. It really doesn't matter. There might be some things that get shifted around just a little bit. Move it back. It's not a big deal. So now everything is mapped together. And for all intents and purposes, this conveyor then would be set up. The one last thing to do is to add in a pan zoom for this conveyor when you click on it. So if you right click on the conveyor and hit set pan, it sets a pan zoom level for this conveyor. So when I click on the conveyor, it automatically zooms me into that conveyor. Another thing that it does is this manual control pops up when you click on it. So if I close this manual control, oh no, where did it go? I click on that conveyor, manual control pops up.
Does manual control have that zoom in, zoom out, go invisible option?
Yes. Yeah. And just here in a second, I'll briefly go over some other helper functions that you should be aware of. You don't have to do any major setup. I mean, maybe you as a software engineer does need to know a little bit more about it, but for right now, basically knowing that it exists is good enough. Because again, I'm not going to just leave you to the wolves and say, all right, this train's done. You guys are good, right?
Sink or swim.
You can always come to me for help and stuff, and we'll walk through some of this, because you're going to remember probably half of it if you're good. If I've done well, maybe more. But yeah, so once you've got the set pan for everything, there's a couple other little things like this photo eye. If you notice this gray area when you select it, is, you can see that from the shading that this photo eye is over top this conveyor. The click event for zooming in is not going to be passed through. We have to kind of let the HMI know that this is on top of this. So there's a property called over conveyor. So if I copy the name of that conveyor and in this over conveyor, paste it.
It'll automatically.
Now, when I click it, it passes through that event, and now it will zoom in. So that's kind of the last step.
What does that do again? The over conveyor?
The over conveyor passes through the click event from this photo eye widget to the conveyor widget.
So you just run past it.
Yeah. So I'm saying the photo eye doesn't care. It doesn't have any click events related to it. So I can just pass it through to that conveyor.
So that was just when you were zoomed out and trying to.
Exactly. So that way, when they want to bring up that manual control, they can click over here and it zooms it in and brings up the manual control. So now theoretically everything is mapped. The conveyors, if you're reading, if all the tags are in there, should be all mapped in. Now, I could probably do a whole nother class on the way that everything is mapped and troubleshooting that step. But to save you from having to remember all that and totally overwhelming you, I'm just going to go on a kind of higher level here and say that within every widget, graphics widget that is, there is a tag template, and there is, for the conveyor widgets, there's kind of the same thing, a tag template, but it's called a status template. And the tag template basically for all of the different statuses. But the important thing is majority of the time, we follow a format. So all the exit photo eyes are going to be name of the conveyor underscore exit underscore PE. I think it's then like .I exit photo eye. It follows that same format. So we can have embedded standard templates for everything. Now there are cases where we will change one thing here or there, or the PLC engineer made a different thing for some edge case. I don't know, but you have the ability to come in here and edit that. But if everything is standard, then at this point, once you set the IP address, once you have the code inserted in the status array, the code inserted into the HMI code table, then when that that conveyor is turned to running, this will turn to green. There's nothing else you have to do. Everything should be linked. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of setting up graphics. At this point, you should be, I don't know, probably 95% of the way there. There's some other things that you might have to edit, like the tag template, some conveyors that you might have mislabeled. You thought it was P101, but the drawing kind of indicated it, but the PLC engineer decided it was P102, little things like that. I mean, that, yeah, you might have to adjust, but 90% of the way there.